Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Jack Abbott never thought he would see the day when the foundation he had rebuilt with Diane Jenkins, the woman who had returned from the grave and sworn redemption, would shatter into 1,000 unrecognizable shards. But the truth had a cruel way of surfacing in Genoa City, and it did so when Victor Newman, of all people, came into possession of the evidence that Diane had not only concealed her involvement in a damaging corporate scheme but had actively sold information to undermine Genoa at a critical moment, leaving Jack gutted in a way that combined heartbreak, fury, and humiliation in a cocktail so bitter he could hardly find words for it. And as he sat in his office at Genoa, the files laid out before him, printouts, voice transcripts, bank records traced through shadow accounts, his head spun with disbelief because he wanted to scream that Victor had forged it, fabricated it, that this was just another Newman ploy to grind Abbott pride into the dust. But deep down he recognized too many of Diane's subtle fingerprints, the little phrases in the recorded calls, the details of Genoa operations that no outsider could have known without inside access, and the sinking feeling in his chest grew heavier by the second as he realized that the woman he had defended against his own family, the woman he had married again to prove his belief in second chances, had been playing her own quiet game in the shadows, and the torment of that realization stripped him of the confidence he normally carried like armor. Instead he felt naked, betrayed, and utterly exposed. The irony that Victor, his lifelong rival, was the one who delivered this evidence added salt to the wound, because Victor's satisfaction radiated in that controlled, understated way he always wielded when he had the upper hand. Victor didn't need to shout, didn't need to gloat. He simply leaned back in Jack's office chair earlier that morning and slid the manila envelope across the polished wood, his eyes glinting with that almost paternal mix of disdain and triumph, saying in that low growl, "I thought you ought to see what your dear Diane has been up to, before it destroys you and your company." And Jack had snatched the envelope, ready to dismiss it, but the contents left him with no defense. Jack replayed every moment in his head, every time he had silenced Ashley or Kyle or Billy when they expressed doubt about Diane's true loyalties, every family dinner where he had insisted that love and trust were enough. And now those memories burned because he had been wrong. He had been blinded by his desire to believe that Diane was capable of permanent change, that their love story could survive the wreckage of their past. But the evidence spoke louder than her promises ever had. Alone in the office after Victor's departure, Jack's hands trembled as he poured himself a drink, though the glass sat untouched as he stared out the window at the Genoa city skyline, feeling the walls of Genoa, of his entire legacy, closing in on him. He thought of Kyle, his son, who had finally come around to accept Diane as a mother again, how much effort it had taken to heal those old wounds, and he imagined the devastation on Kyle's face when he found out his mother had reverted to form, that she had sold out the very family that had fought so hard to embrace her. Jack's mind then darted to Ashley, who would never let him live this down. And though her judgment was the least of his worries, the weight of being proven a fool in front of his siblings cut him deeply. He thought of Billy, who might see this as vindication for doubting Diane. And though Jack had always carried the burden of being the steady, responsible Abbott, at this moment he felt like he had failed not only as Genoa's leader but as the family's moral compass. He remembered those long nights when Diane had sworn to him that she had nothing to hide, how she had cried in his arms about being misunderstood, about needing his trust, and he recalled his own words, whispering assurances into her hair that he believed her, that he would stand by her against the world. Those memories now mocked him, each promise echoing as proof of his gullibility. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was bone-deep personal, because Jack had opened his heart after decades of caution, had let Diane back into the most intimate chambers of his life, had even dared to dream of peace and stability with her, and now it all lay in ruins. Not because Victor had destroyed it, but because Diane herself had. The realization pushed him to his feet in a surge of restless energy, pacing across the office like a caged animal, muttering under his breath, trying to piece together how long she had been doing this, what her endgame had been, whether she ever loved him at all or whether it had all been one elaborate scheme to secure her position and fortune. Meanwhile, Victor was already strategizing in his own office, his mind sharp with the knowledge that this betrayal would destabilize Jack at a pivotal moment. And though Victor took satisfaction in outmaneuvering his old adversary, there was also a cold practicality in his actions. He wanted Genoa vulnerable, wanted the Abbotts fractured, and this was the perfect wedge. Victor knew that Jack's heartbreak would bleed into his business judgment, and Newman could seize opportunities while Jabot floundered. But even Victor, for all his ruthlessness, recognized the human cost in Jack's eyes when he had handed him the proof. It was one thing to crush a competitor, another to watch a man be gutted by the betrayal of someone he trusted most, and for a fleeting second Victor almost pitied him, almost, but not quite, because in the end business and victory were what mattered. As the day stretched on, Jack finally found himself back at the Abbott mansion, the folder still tucked under his arm, dreading the moment he would have to confront Diane. His heart pounding as he rehearsed words he knew would fail him, because how did you articulate the kind of betrayal that cut through decades of history? When Diane appeared, smiling in that way that once melted him, asking about his day, Jack's throat closed, and instead of answering, he slammed the folder onto the coffee table, the papers spilling out like a storm, her eyes widening as she recognized some of them, her face flickering with fear before she schooled it into innocence. "Jack, this isn't what it looks like," she began. But he cut her off, his voice raw and breaking, demanding the truth, demanding she admit what she had done. The exchange spiraled, Diane alternating between denial, justification, and desperate pleas for him to understand, while Jack's anger grew louder, his heartbreak pouring out as he listed every time he had defended her, every ounce of trust he had given her, until he could barely stand to look at her. The confrontation stretched into the night, both of them circling around years of love and lies. And when it ended, Jack stood hollow, realizing that no explanation could repair the rupture. Once trust was shattered at this level, it could never be put back together. Diane wept, insisting she had done it for survival, for leverage, for reasons that sounded hollow in the wake of the truth. But Jack's silence was deafening as he walked away, leaving her alone in the room, the sound of the front door slamming echoing like a final verdict. Outside, in the quiet of the night, Jack felt the cool air on his face, tears he hadn't realized were there streaming down, and for the first time in years he admitted to himself that he was lost. Back at Newman Towers, Victor poured himself a drink, gazing out at the city, knowing that his evidence had not only shifted the balance of corporate power but had shattered his rival's heart, and while he felt the satisfaction of victory, a small part of him, buried beneath years of rivalry, wondered if even Jack Abbott deserved this kind of pain. Jack's night stretched into a blur of sleepless pacing, replaying every word Diane had said in her defense, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he loved with the one who had betrayed him, and though he told himself he would never allow her excuses to worm their way into his heart, he found himself tormented by the memory of her trembling hands and tear-stained face, the way she had begged him to believe that her actions were born not from malice but desperation. And as he poured another drink at dawn, Jack recognized the insidious danger of that narrative. If he allowed himself to pity her, to rationalize her betrayal a survival instinct, he might once again blind himself to the reality that she had knowingly endangered Jabot, his family, and his trust, and yet beneath all his fury he couldn't silence the ache of love still tethered to her, making his grief twice as poisonous. Meanwhile, Diane spent the morning alone in the Abbott mansion, staring at the scattered evidence she hadn't dared to pick up, the silence of the house pressing on her like judgment. And though she told herself that she had acted in a calculated manner to protect her footing in Genoa City's power games, she knew in her gut that she had gone too far, that she had crossed a line Jack would never forgive, and her heart clenched as she realized how quickly her dream of stability, of being accepted by the Abbotts, had crumbled into dust. In her mind she revisited the nights she had made deals over. The phone, the coded conversations with third parties, the moments she had justified her actions by saying it was only temporary leverage, just until she secured her place at Jack's side. But now those rationalizations felt paper-thin in the glare of his anguish, and she wondered whether she had sabotaged herself from the very beginning, incapable of believing she truly deserved happiness without scheming to secure it. Across town, Victor sat in his office at Newman Enterprises, the morning light gleaming across his desk as he reread the reports that had exposed Diane, his expression one of calm satisfaction, because he knew the damage was unfolding exactly as he intended. Jack would be distracted, vulnerable, isolated, and that meant Jabot would falter at a critical juncture in the cosmetics war that Victor had long been orchestrating. Still, as he contemplated the broader chessboard, Victor's mind lingered on the peculiar truth that this particular strike had not required him to invent anything. He hadn't fabricated Diane's betrayal, only uncovered it, and in a way that knowledge gave him a certain grim pride. He had simply revealed reality, and reality had done the rest, tearing Jack apart in a way no strategic bluff could have accomplished. Back at Jabot, Ashley had already noticed Jack's distracted state at the morning meeting, his voice strained, his decisions hesitant, and though she had always suspected Diane of duplicity, seeing her brother so hollowed out sent a pang through her. Because beneath their constant sibling squabbles, Ashley hated seeing Jack so broken. When she pressed him afterward, Jack brushed her off, unwilling to admit just yet that she had been right all along, but Ashley's sharp eyes caught enough to confirm her suspicions, and she quietly resolved to dig on her own, not for vindication but to shield Jabot from imploding while Jack stumbled under the weight of heartbreak. Meanwhile, Kyle wandered into the mansion that afternoon, only to find his mother sitting stiffly on the sofa, eyes rimmed red, and when he asked what was wrong, Diane attempted to mask the truth with vague words about a misunderstanding, but Kyle, who had grown up parsing lies from adults, felt a surge of dread as he pressed her for details. When she refused to answer, he left unsettled, his loyalty to his father tugging at him, and he went straight to Jack's office where he confronted him with anxious questions, only to have Jack explode in frustration, slamming his hand on the desk and blurting out the truth about Diane's betrayal, his voice cracking as he declared, "She sold us out, Kyle, she sold me out." The revelation hit Kyle like a physical blow, memories flashing of every moment he had defended his mother to Summer, to Harrison, to the entire world that had doubted her, and his face hardened as he whispered that he should have known, that maybe people never really change, before storming out, leaving Jack crushed by the realization that Diane's betrayal was now poisoning his son's heart as well. As the fallout rippled through the Abbott family, Victor's satisfaction deepened, but so too did his calculations, because he knew Jack would eventually rally, that the Abbotts had a way of circling their wagons when threatened, so Victor began orchestrating the next move. He directed Michael Baldwin to quietly prepare filings that would put Newman in a position to undercut Jabot's newest product launch, using the distraction of Jack's scandal to push through regulatory maneuvers unnoticed, and he also dispatched Audra Charles to probe for allies among Jabot's restless board members, whispering rumors of Jack's compromised leadership. At the same time, Diane found herself caught in an emotional vice. Part of her wanted to run, to flee the shame and start fresh somewhere far away, but another part clung to the desperate hope of repairing what she had broken, and she drafted letter after letter to Jack that morning, none of which she sent, each torn-up draft littering the floor around her. Her words swung wildly between apologies, justifications, and pleas for another chance, reflecting her inner turmoil, but in her heart she knew Jack was unlikely to forgive her this time. Night fell again, and Jack sat alone in the Abbott study, staring at the fireplace without lighting it, the silence broken only by the ticking clock, and he felt the weight of loneliness settle over him like an old enemy, reminding him of every time he had loved and lost, Phyllis, Nikki, countless others, and he wondered bitterly if he was cursed to repeat the same cycle, forever the fool for believing in love where it could not exist. In that moment he almost admired Victor, not because of the ruthlessness with which he had delivered the evidence, but because Victor seemed immune to such wounds, always shielding himself with iron walls of pragmatism, while Jack's own vulnerability had once again been used as a weapon against him. Yet even as he wrestled with despair, a flicker of determination began to kindle deep inside him, because Jack Abbott was not built to surrender, and if Diane thought she could undermine Jabot and still walk away with his sympathy, she was mistaken. He resolved that even if his heart remained in ruins, he would not allow his company to follow, and with grim resolve he began drafting strategies, calling in Billy to handle external affairs, leaning on Ashley for scientific stability, and putting plans in place to ensure that Jabot would endure. Diane, sensing the shift in his energy, made one last attempt late that night to reach him, slipping into his office with tears glistening under the desk lamp, her voice breaking as she begged him to remember their love, to believe that she had only done what she thought necessary, that she still wanted their future. But Jack looked at her with eyes like stone, telling her in a voice stripped of warmth that love without trust was meaningless, and that while he could never erase his feelings, he could never again open the door she had slammed shut with her betrayal. Diane collapsed into sobs, but Jack turned away, forcing himself not to falter, because if he yielded now, he knew he would never recover his self-respect. As Diane's sobs echoed in the corridor after she fled, Jack sat back down, exhausted but resolute, whispering to himself that Victor may have exposed the truth, but it would be Jack Abbott, not Victor, not Diane, who determined how the story ended, and though his heart bled, his spirit steeled itself for the battles to come. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of Diane's betrayal spread like a virus through every corner of Jack's life, and though he tried to maintain his composure at Jabo, the whispers in the hallways betrayed that word was already seeping out, board members exchanging wary looks, employees wondering if their leader had been compromised by the very woman he had championed, and Jack could feel the weight of their judgment pressing against his back like daggers as he walked the halls of the company he had spent his life defending. Meanwhile, Diane spiraled in the mansion, increasingly isolated, her phone silent as friends and allies distanced themselves, her desperation mounting as she replayed her choices and realized too late that her hunger for security had destroyed the very foundation she craved. And though she made repeated attempts to reach Jack, each message went unanswered, each voicemail left to languish unheard, until the silence itself became a louder condemnation than any words he could have spoken. Victor, of course, kept a watchful eye on the fallout, his satisfaction tempered with strategy, because he knew timing was everything. He held back from striking Jabo directly, letting Jack's emotional collapse weaken the company from within, and in the meantime he cultivated new alliances, ensuring that when he did make his move, the Abbotts would be too fractured to resist. Ashley noticed her brother's exhaustion, the dark circles under his eyes, the clipped way he responded to simple questions, and though she had been Diane's harshest critic, her heart softened now that the truth was out, because seeing Jack punished for loving too much felt cruel even to her, and she quietly doubled her efforts at Jabo, making sure the lab stayed steady, holding meetings Jack was too distracted to handle, determined that the company wouldn't collapse while he struggled to piece his life together. Kyle, however, was caught in the cruelest storm of all, torn between his father's raw anguish and his mother's desperate pleas, his heart aching for the stability he had only recently begun to believe in, and though he told himself he was done with Diane's lies, a part of him still wanted to protect her, to believe she had acted out of misguided love rather than cold treachery, and that inner war left him restless, short-tempered, snapping at Summer when she tried to console him, leaving her to fear that this family implosion would destroy their own fragile reconciliation. Late one night, Jack found Kyle in the study, pacing furiously, and when their eyes met, the silence between them was filled with all the unspoken words of two men mourning the same woman in different ways. Kyle finally broke, shouting that he was sick of being forced to choose between his parents, that he wished Diane had never come back if this was the price, and Jack, his own voice ragged, admitted that he wished the same, though the words cut him to say it, and for a moment father and son stood together in their shared grief, united not by solutions but by the sheer weight of betrayal they both carried. Diane, watching from the staircase unseen, felt her knees buckle as she heard the devastation her choices had caused, and for the first time she realized that she hadn't just lost Jack's love, she had jeopardized her son's trust as well, perhaps forever, and that knowledge hollowed her out in a way no scheme, no ambition, ever could. The Abbott mansion, once alive with warmth, now felt like a mausoleum of broken trust, each room echoing with ghosts of what might have been. And though Jack told himself he would focus on rebuilding, the quiet moments still tormented him with memories of Diane's laughter, her touch, the sense of belonging he had foolishly believed in. And it was in those moments, alone and unguarded, that the tears would come, silent but relentless, reminding him that even in his strength, he was still a man who had loved and lost. Victor, hearing reports of Jack's condition, allowed himself a rare smirk, because in his mind this was the inevitable consequence of underestimating him. Jack had gambled everything on a woman's redemption, and now he paid the price, while Victor moved forward with clear eyes and an iron will, preparing his next strike in the corporate war that had defined their rivalry for decades. Yet beneath all the moves and countermoves, beneath the fury and heartbreak, one truth remained inescapable. Jack Abbott had been betrayed not by an enemy, but by the woman he trusted most, and that wound, deeper than any business loss, would haunt him long after the evidence was filed away and the Newman-Abbott rivalry took its next turn. Because betrayal by an enemy was expected, but betrayal by love was a scar that never truly healed.